Welcome to episode 18 of When Safeguarding Fails, the Lizzie Gladwell Crisis. I'm Jeremy Gladwell, Lizzie's dad, and I'm telling the heartbreaking true story of how our daughter, a vulnerable young person, was taken, isolated, and subjected to coercive control, and how she was cast adrift by the agencies tasked with safeguarding. We were mystified. How could the police and adult social care continue to side with Coral and the Wilson-Clark family, despite clear evidence that what was happening to Lizzie was coercive, abusive, and exploitative? At every critical juncture, these agencies gave Coral a green light. Taking Lizzie, a vulnerable young person with severe learning difficulties, from outside her home the moment she turned 18. Green light. Imposing rules that severed Lizzie's ties to her family. Green light. Taking and hiding Lizzie's phone, replacing it with one without key family contacts. Green light. Blocking, monitoring and controlling her communications. Green light. Creating deep fear and anxiety in Lizzie to the point that she started self-harming. Green light. Making offensive and threatening Facebook posts about us. Green light. Aggressively preventing Lizzie's own dad from seeing his daughter. Green light. Making a false accusation of rape against an innocent uncle, a move that shattered family bonds and caused immeasurable trauma. Green light. The list went on. Yet with Mother's Day approaching, we dared to hope. Would Coral allow Lizzie to spend time on this special day with her mum? Or would it end in yet another act of heartbreaking obstruction? A few days before Mother's Day, I received a text from Lizzie. "Can you tell Mummy to message me, please? Kiss." Pause. Why would Lizzie need to ask me to relay this? The answer was painfully clear. Lizzie didn't have her mum's number. Again. Wiped. Deleted. Jane wasn't at home at the time, but even if she were, I'd have hesitated to involve her immediately. She was still on an endless NHS waiting list for talking therapy counselling. I wanted to shield my wife from unnecessary anguish. I replied to Lizzie, attempting to keep it light. "Everything all right? Is it something I can help with, or is this about call the midwife? Kiss." Lizzie used to love watching Call the Midwife, but it sometimes led to her asking questions of a biological nature in the middle of dinner. "It's about Mother's Day, kiss kiss," she said. I hesitated before responding. "Mink, I suggest you run any ideas about Mother's Day by me first. You might make a bad situation worse if you're not careful. Up to you, but that's my advice, kiss." I wanted to ask her what she wanted, kiss, Lizzie replied. Lizzie had been ripped from our lives, an event followed by a catalogue of incidents that bore all the hallmarks of deliberate isolation and coercion. Jane had seen her own daughter for less than an hour in the previous 7 months. This had been a bereavement for both of us. But does the emotional grief hit the mother the hardest? Maybe. Jane and I were both struggling in different ways, but I was not separate from Jane's struggles. I replied carefully. What would she want? A day out with her daughter. There's no gift, no chocolates, no flowers, no teddy that could compare to that. And if she can't have that, then a card would be good. Make sure the message is from the loving heart of Lizzie, not Liz or anyone else. Kiss. Fine, kiss, came the reply. I left this with Lizzie. We had no idea whether it was safe for her to receive messages, so both Jane and I tended to let Lizzie decide when to initiate contact with us. Most of the time we were blocked anyway, and we were convinced that some messages from her phone were not from her. However, the exchange about Mother's Day was from our Lizzie. 2 days later, Lizzie sent another message. Do you really think I'm two people? This cryptic message needed clarification, so I responded with, Eh? Liz and Lizzie, came the reply. Why are you asking? I inquired. Lizzie's reply was revealing. I feel like Liz isn't a nice person, and Lizzie was better. Lizzie was reflecting on her identity and felt she was being moulded into someone unpleasant by her custodians. I couldn't mention the ongoing investigation into the false rape allegation, but I knew Lizzie wasn't responsible for accusing her uncle. Was she developing a Jekyll and Hyde duality? Liz and Lizzie represented a split personality, indicating psychological distress as she struggled between her true self and the imposed identity. We were losing our Lizzie, but this exchange indicated she was still there, somewhere. To her admission that Lizzie was better, I gently answered, "That makes a lot of sense." "What do you think of Liz?" she asked. Time to be careful. This could be a trap, encouraging me to suggest I did not like my own daughter. "I don't really know Liz," I said, "but I love Lizzie." "Okay," she replied. "What do you think of Lizzie?" I smiled to myself. I was back on more familiar territory here. Lizzie was my fun and playful daughter who I could have latte walks with. I understood my Lizzie, my precious daughter. "Yeah," she said. "Why all these questions?" I asked. Of course, I had a good idea of why all these questions. 2 weeks earlier, she had been taken to a police station by Coral so that she could falsely accuse her uncle of rape. A degree of introspective reflection was natural and inevitable. In response to my text asking her why all these questions, Lizzie answered, "Don't know." We weren't going to resolve anything or get to the heart of the matter by text, so I said, "Happy to talk if you want a phone call, Mink." No reply. Half an hour later, I texted to ask, "What do you think of Liz, then?" "Not sure," she said. Over the next day or so, Lizzie and Jane exchanged texts, trying to arrange a meet-up on Mother's Day. Jane proposed that we take Lizzie out to a place that was reasonably local, but far enough from the house, yet still familiar to Lizzie. Jane suggested Water's Edge, a local nature reserve. We had been there as a family many times. There were wide, open tracks, lakes, trees, ducks, swans, dragonflies, and birds. Fond memories. More importantly, there was a cafe and an indoor visitor centre. And this was crucial because the weather forecast for Mother's Day was not promising, so having an indoor option would be helpful. Lizzie could not agree to that. After all, it would mean being in a car with her parents. Not allowed. Lizzie insisted it had to be Wheelsby Woods, a place within walking distance of the Wilson Clark house. Jane wanted the afternoon with her daughter, but Lizzie could only offer an hour. We advised having an indoor plan B given the weather forecast, but there was no such option at Wheelsby Woods. Jane requested that Lizzie's phone be switched off to prevent a stream of texts from absorbing her attention. We couldn't bear the thought that if a mere hour was all we had, that Lizzie would be tethered to her phone amidst relentless messaging. If we were seeing Lizzie, that precious time must not be stolen from us or her. Lizzie could not agree to that either. The closest compromise was that Lizzie's phone would be on silent. Where we absolutely drew the line was on Lewis, Coral, or Nick appearing, or following, or swooping to retrieve Lizzie. At every point, Jane was being forced to give ground on the duration, on the venue, on the expectations, pushed right back to an unsatisfactory agreement that we were able to see Lizzie for an hour in the rain at 2 p.m. until 3 p.m. in the woods near to the Wilson Clark house, and Lizzie's phone would still be switched on. This was intensely upsetting for Jane. And bear in mind that these arrangements were about Mother's Day. Mother's Day. Compromise after compromise. And yet Jane agreed to the terms that were being dictated via Lizzie, because all Jane wanted for Mother's Day was to see her daughter. Eventually it reached a point of impasse between Lizzie and Jane. Sometimes things cannot be resolved by text. Text messages are useful for asking someone to pick up some milk, but not for untangling such a complex issue as this. Jane's composure was unravelling, so I intervened and asked Lizzie to call me when she was able. When Lizzie got back to the house after college, she rang. She was not alone. Of course, she was not alone. So who was ringing, Lizzie or Liz? We discussed the aspect of the phone being on silent. Lizzie was unhappy about that, anxious even. There seemed to be an immovable expectation that the phone would be on, active and contactable, umbilically linked to Coral and Lewis. I said, "It's not for me to work this one out. You're going to have to figure it out. But since Mummy has not seen you properly to talk to for over 7 months, it would be completely inappropriate, on a little window of time, for the phone to be ringing, which is quite possible, isn't it? It's quite likely. The phone will be ringing, Lewis will be ringing you, Coral will be ringing you, and so on. That can't happen. If you're going to be seeing Mummy, you're seeing Mummy. That's all she's saying." We reached neither agreement nor disagreement on this point, but at least it had been addressed. "All right, sweetie," I said. "I'll let you go. Just think about it and let us know what you decide. We love you. Okay, bye, Lizzie said. End of call. These negotiations were difficult because we weren't really negotiating with Lizzie. Lizzie wasn't the one calling the shots. Ultimately, we were trying to reach an agreement with Coral about Lizzie being able to see her own mum. We thought a deal had been brokered, allowing Lizzie to see us for 1 hour in the afternoon of Mother's Day in the rain at Wheelsby Woods. Coral had other ideas. Saturday 9th of March 2024. 1 day before Mother's Day, Lizzie texted Jane to say that she wasn't able to see her as agreed. Coral had arranged something else. As you can imagine, Jane was distraught. How much longer would this cruel game continue, with Coral's constant manoeuvres to twist the knife? The trouble was, it wasn't just us she was harming. Lizzie sent rapid-fire messages trying to make a new arrangement. But here was the problem. Coral had booked for the whole family, including Lizzie, to go to the Rage Room in Hull for the entire afternoon, from lunchtime through to tea time. The Rage Room? It's an anger management venue. Apparently there's a room with big rocks and big hammers. You go there and, well, you get the idea. Who wouldn't want to spend the entire afternoon at the Rage Room on Mother's Day? It sounded absolutely delightful. Could we meet Lizzie in the morning instead? No, we were committed elsewhere. Lizzie already knew that, and Coral knew that. Could we go after tea time? This was early March, in the rain, in the woods, in the dark, on Mother's Day. This was about humiliation, not by Lizzie. Bless her, she tried, she wanted to meet, but there was no way Jane could agree to standing around in the dark on a cold and rainy evening in Wheelsby Woods to meet with Lizzie, who may, or quite probably, may not appear. Jane had compromised on everything else, but this was the straw that broke her, the compromise too far. In a frantic back and forth of text messages, Lizzie, Jane and I desperately tried to fit the pieces of an impossible puzzle together. During these exchanges, I received a message from Lizzie that I don't think was meant for me. It said, "She's my mother. Yes, I left, but she's still my mother." This message didn't fit with the flow, almost as though Lizzie had accidentally sent a text to me that she had meant to send to Coral. We scrabbled around for other options. Did Lizzie have to go to the Rage Room? Yes, she did. What if she saw us for an hour just after lunch and then I took her to the Rage Room afterwards? Not an option. What about seeing us on a different day? Could we get something in the diary? No. We couldn't see Lizzie in the morning. Coral had deliberately extinguished any chance of us seeing Lizzie for the entirety of the afternoon, leaving only the remote possibility of a ridiculous encounter in the dark dregs of the day. Happy Mother's Day. There was no misunderstanding or misinterpretation. Coral had orchestrated every detail to ensure that Jane could not see her daughter. This was sabotage. Cruel and calculated sabotage. Journal entry Sunday 10th of March 2024. Mother's Day draws to a close, and we've done our best to salvage it with God's help. We went for a drive. had a latte and a cake in a cafe, and then we went home to watch Sherlock Gnomes. One of Lizzie's friends popped round with some flowers for Jane, which was a really sweet gesture, greatly appreciated. This friend said that Lizzie had bombed her out too a number of times. She also said that she feels like some messages are from Lizzie and others aren't, and that's consistent with our own experience and that of others. Jane did receive a text message from Lizzie's phone this morning. "Happy Mother's Day, kiss." All Jane could say in response was, "Thanks, kiss." What else could she say? And what else could Lizzie have said? It's been a total disaster, orchestrated by the queen of chaos and cruelty, Coral Wilson Clark. Dear Lord, may this painful trial come to an end. Please, Lord, bring it to an end. Coral's obstructive actions were so blatant, so obvious, so overt. I expect that Coral knew full well that the agencies would do nothing, that they would dismiss this as an isolated incident, that they would not see the big picture, that they would not join the dots, that they would not care. Not about Lizzie, not about us, not about safeguarding, not about the law. And Coral, of course, was absolutely right. I sent Gary Atkinson an email updating him on developments. My message concluded with, "I implore you to read what I share with you in the spirit it is offered, a profound concern for Lizzie's welfare and well-being. I also ask that you momentarily step into our shoes, especially Jane's, to understand our perspective." I included the text messages between Lizzie, Jane and me about Mother's Day, so Gary could recognise Lizzie's attempts to meet with us. I felt I still had a duty to keep him informed, even if he never replied to my email, which of course he didn't. Emboldened, Coral progressed the next stage of her plan to isolate Lizzie. Coral had shattered the links between Lizzie and her family through the false allegation of rape. She had inflicted a severe emotional assault on Jane on Mother's Day. Next in her sights was me, and for this she once more enlisted the help of Humberside Police. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of When Safeguarding Fails, the Lizzie Gladwell Crisis. If you found it moving or helpful, or if you think our story could help others, then please like, share, or simply tell others about it. Thank you again, and join me for the next episode.